questions that I get from people just like you looking to move to South Carolina is, where should I live? As in, what's the best town for me and where do you recommend in South Carolina? Now, I'm going to take you through the top 3 most popular towns in South Carolina just over the border from Charlotte. And stay tuned to the very end because I'm going to give you my favorite and preferred town that you might want to take a closer look at. Let's go ahead and dive in. There's 3 of the most popular towns in South Carolina. All have more than 20,000 residents in each of these towns. And I'm going to share with you the pros and the cons of each of these towns so you can get a feel and make your top pick compared to all the other towns available. Now, if you haven't already seen my other video, you can go ahead and check it out right here, where I go through some of the smaller towns over the border in South Carolina and why those could be good options. The tiny but forgotten towns. But if you're looking for a more populated town, has way more going on from food, shopping, as well as proximity to Charlotte, this is the video for you. So let's start this video with Indian Land. Indian Land is an area located just to the southeast of Fort Mill. It borders right onto North Carolina, and it has become a very popular area. Now, one of the downsides to Indian Land is the fact that it's such a far drive from I-77. And in fact, that's going to be one of your biggest issues. The positive to this is that there's actually more than one way to get to Indian Land, one being coming in through South Carolina, the other being skirting up through North Carolina. The Indian Land sits on the border of North and South Carolina. In fact, just over the border into North Carolina is Marvin, which you've heard me talk about in the past. Marvin is a very affluent town, one of the more affluent towns in and around the Charlotte area. Now, Indian Land sprawls, and while there is a little bit of a hub, it's not necessarily what I would call a cute little downtown. But there is a hub to Indian Land. But let's take a look at the population. Indian Land has about 26,000 people. Now, mind you, when I give you guys populations, I know they're always changing. Census data is not always updated, but I'm gonna work off the most updated information that I have at this point in time, which is telling us 26,000 residents. Now, in looking at this area, as we see that there's a large population and its proximity to a very affluent area, you might be wondering, well, what do prices look like in this area? So when we look at the median home price of Indian Land, we're looking at about $547,000 for a home. Now, as I always state, it varies on the size of the home and the location, but this is a good median price for you to really look at to see how far will your dollar go for a home in this area. Now, one of the biggest positives to this area is there's so much available land. We're seeing a lot of new home growth in the area with developers coming in and creating some beautiful communities. The challenge with this is as the population grows, the housing grows, but the infrastructure doesn't grow as fast, you're going to have some bottlenecks. Now, these bottlenecks usually come in the form of roads, and that's where you're gonna see your biggest downside, lots of traffic and congestion coming in and out of the Indian Land area. Now, there are plenty of other ways you can get there and you don't have to take the main drive, but if you're looking to commute potentially into Charlotte, this may not be your best bet for a location you want to be in. Now, another huge draw to this area are the low taxes. Not only do you have South Carolina taxes, but you also are outside of the major cities, so therefore taxes are even lower from there. This has been a major draw, but what I can tell you is, especially as someone who's a former New Yorker, that taxes are nothing like you'd see in New York or California. Instead, they're actually fairly moderate, so you're not going to notice a huge change from town to town. And as I mentioned before, another downside is it doesn't necessarily have a downtown center, not like you'd see in Fort Mill or Rock Hill. It is a town, but there's not a hub. Now, while there's not a downtown, what I can tell you is there's certainly plenty of community in this area, and you're gonna feel that when you're there. Now, although with my last breath, I just knocked the location, I'm also going to give it points, and that's because it is in great proximity to the South Charlotte area, as well as Ballantyne. Now, as I've mentioned in other videos, if you're commuting for work, you may actually be commuting to Ballantyne. Ballantyne has the largest business center in Charlotte, so this very well could be a hub for where you might be on a daily basis. But once again, if you're going further north, you're going to hit some bottlenecks, so it's food for thought. Now, of the 3 towns that I'm going to be talking about today, Indian Land is the farthest south that we're going to be going. In fact, our other 2 towns sit just over the border of Charlotte and both of them have their own pros and cons. So let's take a look at the next one. I'm 𝗖𝐻 with Living in Charlotte, North Carolina. If you've been thinking about moving to Charlotte or the surrounding suburbs, go ahead and subscribe below so you can be the first to learn about the current market here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I love helping people just like you who are looking to move to Charlotte, North Carolina or relocate to another area town. So whether it's 9 days or 90 days from now, feel free to give me a text, a call, an email, or even set up a Zoom meeting. All of my contact information is in the description below. I'd be happy to make your move everything you want it to be. Rock Hill, South Carolina. With a population of over 74,000 people, Rock Hill is the most populated town in South Carolina, just over the border from Charlotte. With an area of about 43 square miles, Rock Hill is sprawling, and it is certainly what we would consider a city center of sorts. You've got a sweet little downtown with all kinds of shops. I've actually done a few videos on this if you go check out my videos on Rock Hill. But it has a sense of community, a sense of history, and it sits right on the railroad line. So there's also quite a bit of manufacturing that still take place in the Rock Hill area. Now, if we're looking at Rock Hill on a map, it sits just south of Fort Mill, right under the Catawba River. Literally, the Catawba River will cut right through, separating Fort Mill and Rock Hill. While Rock Hill has been a very popular town for a very long time, the speed at which it is expanding has slowed as other areas become more desirable and more prominent to growth and expansion, such as, of course, Indian Land that we just talked about, and some of the smaller towns in the area, such as York, Clover, and Lake Wylie. Now, one of the biggest differences that you're going to note with this next bit of information in comparison to Indian Land that we just talked about is the median home price. The median home price in the Rock Hill area is about $324,000. Now that is light years away from what we were just talking about as the median home price for Indian Land, and here's why. More homes and more availability in the Rock Hill area versus less homes and less availability in the Indian Land area. The other key piece to this is Indian Land sits, as I had mentioned, just over the border from Marvin. The homes that are being built there are much newer. In fact, the average age of a home is less than 15 years old because they're all being built new construction, or most of them are. If we flip over to Rock Hill is fairly historic. One of the first towns to be founded on the South Carolina border, over the border from Charlotte. With that, they have been building homes there for decades, if not centuries. So with a population of over 75,000 people and a town that's been around for centuries, you're going to have a plethora of homes available. Now, these homes are going to vary in size, in age, in condition, but all that put together is going to give you a median of $300,000. Now, I will note there are plenty of homes that are way over $300,000, and there are homes that are at $300,000. So this may actually be the location for you if you're looking for more bang for your buck when you're talking about dollar per square foot. Now, because it's over to the west of Indian Land, it also sits right on I-77. It goes right up through it. This gives much easier access to get into Charlotte and into North Carolina in general. Now, with that, the commute time from this location is the same as Indian Land, anywhere between 30 to 35 minutes depending upon traffic. Now, one of the downsides to this area is there are pockets that are going through really heavy economic redevelopment and regentrification. Now, if you are looking to invest in the area and potentially flips or renovations, this may be the town you want to look in, simply for the fact that there's plenty of homes that need to be renovated, but could catch a pretty decent price when you're talking about rental income. Now, and speaking about investments, I will note that if you are not the primary resident of that property, your taxes will be 3 times that of a primary resident. So just food for thought, that's everywhere in South Carolina. Now, one of the biggest positives and another huge draw to the Rock Hill area is going to be the Catawba River, as well as all of the parks and availability for outdoor activities. Access to recreation, as some of you may know, is not as commonplace in some parts of the country or even other areas of North Carolina. However, everywhere that I seem to find and investigate when it comes to Charlotte and the South Carolina upstate, there are abundances of parks and recreation so that you as the public have access no matter where you go. Now, the Catawba River has things like going down in floats down the river. You can set off at a certain point, it'll float you right into Rock Hill. You've got kayaking and paddleboarding, and of course there's still also a decently short drive up to the Whitewater Center if you really want to get outdoors. Now, in addition to this, Rock Hill also has an abundance of culture. There's a lot of historic buildings downtown, museums, and festivals that happen throughout the year. I have plenty of favorites, but I would definitely get out there for some of the community parades. They are a blast. From a position of cost of living, Rock Hill is certainly a phenomenal town to take a look at. You have the outdoor activities, the accessibility to Charlotte, shopping and dining. It's got the cutest little downtown, but there's also opportunity for growth and redevelopment. So if you're getting in early, you'll reap the benefit later. Rock Hill is definitely at the top of the list of favorites for the South Carolina area. For our third and final town for this video, we are going to take a look at Fort Mill. Now, you've probably seen some of my other videos on Fort Mill where I go into the little historic downtown. By the way, still the best chai latte I have ever had at that coffee shop.
They make a delicious chai tea latte. You cannot miss it.
Now, Fort Mill is a beautiful little town just nestled under the border of North Carolina. In fact, the border goes like this, and South Carolina is here. This is all of Fort Mill. So Fort Mill kind of takes up that upper quadrant of South Carolina where it dips into, or looks like it pushes up into North Carolina. There's a lot of advantages to living in Fort Mill, but I'm going to point out the first one. Proximity. The proximity to Ballantyne, to the Palisades, to the Catawba River, Lake Wylie, you name it. It has proximity and ease when talking about transportation, especially if you make a commute anywhere into the North Carolina area. In fact, we also have people that live in the Fort Mill area who commute to Columbia, South Carolina. Columbia, South Carolina is only about a 45-minute to an hour drive south of Fort Mill. So you actually might have some neighbors that go farther south than they do north. The population of Fort Mill is about 33,000 people. Now, that has grown substantially since 2020 when we had our boom in the real estate market. And it's slowed slightly, but we're still seeing a large population of people moving into the area. Now, over the last few years, like most areas of the country, the median price range has certainly gone up. Now, what I love about Fort Mill is you've got some options for smaller homes, but also some very large luxury homes in the area. Shout out to my favorite builders in South Carolina. You know who you are. That being said, there's a lot of opportunity. You can be in either a development with more close-knit houses, or you can have 2 acres of land with a magnificent home on it. There is a ton of variety and all styles of homes are welcome. Now, when looking at the most recent sales in the area over the last year, we look and see a median sales price of about $514,000. Now, mind you, this takes into account townhomes, large homes, small homes, you get the idea. But it also shows that Fort Mill is a desirable area with a reasonable population and reasonable prices. Now, as I mentioned proximity, we are going to take a look at how long it takes to get to Uptown Charlotte. I will note, as I always do, most people don't go to Uptown, but that being said, it is the center of Charlotte, so it's easy to measure. You're about 18 miles from Fort Mill to the city center of Charlotte, about a 25-minute drive, give or take traffic. The nice thing is you have a lot of opportunity to either take the 485 belt, come up 77, go through some back roads. There's a lot of opportunity no matter where you need to go. Now, with the rapid growth in the area, you're gonna have the same bottleneck as most other towns, and that's infrastructure not keeping up. And with this being said, there are plenty of roads in the Fort Mill area that need to be expanded. Are they gonna be done anytime soon? It's unknown, but people are voting for it. It will happen eventually. But this happens with every town. We're seeing it in Asheville, we're seeing it in South Carolina, areas of Charlotte. This is not an isolated problem for Fort Mill, but things will expand and get better, don't worry. And I will note, this is not traffic like you experience in Atlanta, New York, and LA. This is North Carolina, South Carolina traffic. We're talking a 5-minute, 10-minute slowdown, so don't panic. Now, one of the biggest reasons why people are flocking to the Fort Mill area, schools. Fort Mill is the #1 school district in all of South Carolina. We're talking all the way to the coast, all the way south to Georgia. It is the #1. Now with that, it's also spurring more people doubling down, moving to the area. One of the downsides to this is some of the schools will stop registrations for students if they become too populated until another school has been built. Now the positive to this is they're keeping control of the population of students so that everybody gets the proper education that they need. Now, that being said, they are building schools left and right. So your child will be in a good school if you do move to the area. That's almost guaranteed. Now, if we're taking a look at cost of living, the median home value is about $324,000. Well, if you look at the comparison of Fort Mill at $514,000, that's a bit of a change with a town just over the border from it. But as I mentioned before, you may be willing to pay a little bit extra from a cost of living standpoint to have the proximity to North Carolina, shopping, dining, etc., but also the extremely popular and highly rated schools. Now, another, I think, amazing positive of this town is the downtown itself. Now, Fort Mill, you could kind of picture it having two downtowns. There's the actual downtown in Fort Mill, which I think is so quaint and adorable. Right across the street, there's this huge historic monument park, it goes for quite a ways. You've got biking trails, all kinds of things, but it is the cutest little downtown. Now, there's another hub, which isn't really a downtown area, and that's Baxter Village. Now, Baxter Village is absolutely gorgeous. It's an actual neighborhood, but you can go to this neighborhood, go to restaurants, you can go for walks, there's parks that you can go through. So it feels like another hub of Fort Mill, even though it's a neighborhood in and of itself. You don't have to live there to go enjoy it. And of course, you've got Carowinds. Carowinds is kind of like Universal Studios. Carowinds is a Paramount park, which if you've never heard of one, I don't know if there's actually any others aside from Carowinds, but if you are looking for a lot of fun on a fall or spring day, don't go in summer, it's too hot, you can go to Carowinds. Now, if you do want to go through summer and hang out at the theme park, they actually do have a water park as well. So a little bit of extra fun. It's right on the border, but it is in the Fort Mill area. So you've got increases in multiple industries, which is consistently improving the economy of the area. A lot of the more popular industries are going to be the healthcare industry, technology, as well as distribution centers and some manufacturing. So where should you live? What I'll tell you is I do have a favorite. I know, it's like picking kids. There's never a favorite, but there really is, right? I have a favorite. My absolute favorite for the aesthetic and feel of the peace and tranquility is going to be Indian Land. Indian Land has more land, go figure, and it has more larger properties with a more tranquil feel. I love big private lots and trees. That's going to have that. But for every other reason, I wouldn't want to pick Indian Land. In fact, my number one that hits all of the nails on the head for the kind of place that I would want to live, for proximity, cost of living, availability of homes, but also the culture and the availability of shopping and dining, etc. Fort Mill. Fort Mill is my go-to. One thing I did not mention about Fort Mill, it's only a few minutes from the airport. That's right, Charlotte Douglas International Airport is only about 20 minutes from Fort Mill. So you still got easy ability to travel as well. So if after hearing those three, you also agree with Fort Mill, we can be friends. If you didn't, I'm just kidding. It doesn't matter to me where you want to live. I just want to make sure I'm bringing you guys the information you need so you can make that choice. I love the Rock Hill area for its architecture and its old town, downtown feel. I love Indian Land for the properties itself. And Fort Mill is just an all-around top hit if you are looking for the perfect place to live in South Carolina. So hopefully this video answered your questions as to where should you live in South Carolina, and hopefully my opinions didn't sway you away from your favorites, but instead shed some light on some things you needed to know before making that decision. Now, if you have other questions, be sure to drop them in the comments below. I'm here to answer them all, or you could shoot me a quick text and I'd be happy to respond. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I work with people just like you, looking to make the move to the Charlotte, North Carolina area or South Carolina. So if that's you, all of my information is in the comments and the description below. Give me a call, a text, an email, whether it's 9 days or 90 days from now, whether you're moving across the world, across the country, or just across town, I'm here to make your move everything you want it to be. So until next time, I look forward to showing you around town.